Good evening. Tonight on In Focus, we examine two unfolding geopolitical stories that are reshaping the international security landscape. First, Denmark is significantly increasing its military presence in Greenland, following high-level talks with the United States that ended in what Danish officials call a fundamental disagreement. Washington's push for greater strategic control over the Arctic territory is clashing with Copenhagen's insistence on sovereignty, while European allies deploy troops to support Denmark's Arctic defense posture. In our second segment, Europe faces a different challenge: the rise of drone warfare and Emergency Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe meetings amid escalating the Russia-Ukraine war. Are these multilateral forums capable of shaping real outcomes, or are Europeans building new ad hoc alliances to counter hybrid threats? Tonight, we navigate sovereignty, deterrence, and the limits of diplomacy in a volatile world. Welcome to the program. Let's start with Denmark, which has announced a significant increase in its military presence in Greenland amid the growing tensions with the United States over the Arctic territory's future. According to Time magazine, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen described recent talks in Washington with U.S. officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as revealing a fundamental disagreement with President Trump's push for expanded American influence in Greenland. Copenhagen and Nuuk firmly reject efforts to transfer control of the semi-autonomous island to Washington, emphasizing respect for Danish sovereignty and Greenlanders' self-determination even. In response to the dispute and broader Arctic security concerns, Denmark and several NATO allies are deploying additional forces, including aircraft, ships, and soldiers, to reinforce defense capabilities in the region. A high-level working group will continue dialogue, but red lines remain. So our first story takes us to the Arctic, where Denmark is fortifying its military presence in Greenland in the face of renewed U.S. interest in the strategically critical island. Joining us to unpack the strategic, diplomatic and geopolitical dimensions of this standoff is Justin Thomas Russell, Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center in Florida. Thank you very much for being here with us, Justin. So could you give us a little summary of why Denmark and the United States are in what the officials described as a fundamental disagreement over Greenland?
Well, it's always good to be with you, Mark. Look, the disagreement focuses on this. Denmark has had sovereign control over Greenland as a territory for some time now. And the U.S. coming in and saying, nah, you know what? This isn't in the best interest of us. We want it. We're going to take it. It would be similar to like Mexico coming in, or even, Russia coming in saying, you know what? We want Puerto Rico. It's in our best interest to have it. You guys aren't doing anything with it. We're going to take Puerto Rico. Well, it's a sovereignty question. It is, and particularly with the fact that we're dealing with two NATO allies going head to head. It doesn't bode well for the alliance, and it doesn't bode well for the U.S. as far as trying to make friends with our allies. All this does is continue to isolate us and make us look like a bully.
Now, President Trump cites national security and missile defense as reasons for the U.S. wanting to be taking over Greenland. Do you think that's valid, or might there be more to it than that? Perhaps those rare earth minerals under the ground?
I mean, look, it's Donald Trump. I mean, all of those are in play. Does it make money for his friends and his family? Absolutely. You've got raw materials there that make stuff like computer chips, electronics. You've got rare earth minerals that are helpful in defense coming out of Greenland. So there's that. It does provide a very strategic launching point for an Arctic strategy, which, by the way, the U.S. has been completely blind to or stuck its head in the ice over Arctic strategy. And that's why Russia is beating us, China is beating us. Our Nordic partners and our Canadian neighbors are doing amazing things in the Arctic. We're the only ones left outside of the gas station on this. So there is a strategic effort, but we have to go back to history and look at the fact that, look, we had a presence there. Somebody in a previous administration decided it was a good idea for us to withdraw. We didn't need that presence there, and we gave up several bases and the ability to have personnel there. What the Danes did was said that, look, you know what, you can close them down, but you are welcome to come back anytime and reopen the bases. Donald Trump has taken this way over the top and way outside the parameters of that and said, nope, we're just going to take the whole thing.
Yes, I mentioned this on the program a few days ago, this treaty between the United States and Denmark. I think it was in the 1950s, wasn't it? Where Denmark said, look, you can use Greenland as a base. Of course, we were in the middle of the Cold War back then, but really gave the United States carte blanche of what they would like to use, or how they would like to use Greenland. So what does Trump need that he doesn't have?
That's a loaded question, Mark. What Trump needs is a foreign policy and national strategy victory where he looks like he is the genius in the room. It is the Danes don't tell the United States, and Prime Minister Frederiksen doesn't tell Donald Trump, the President of the United States, what to do, how to do it, and what's justified and legal. That's inherently what Donald Trump is looking for. The argument that this strategy is mainly based on the interests of U.S. national security is jazz hands. It is smoke and mirrors, because the reality is we have it. We don't have to be a bully about it. All we have to do is open the doors. We have the key to the door. All we have to do is unlock it and open up for business again. To the point where the Danes have even said, look, if you want commercial access to Greenland, work with us and we will help out. That's why we have a foreign commercial service inside the Department of Commerce here in the United States government. All they have to do is work with their Danish counterparts and they'll gladly bring us in. It's a matter of, we want to be the big power player in the Western Hemisphere, and as long as a European partner is in our backyard, that doesn't sit well with Donald Trump.
Well, Denmark and European NATO partners have been increasing military activity in Greenland. Today, a large amount of European NATO soldiers arrived in Greenland. What do you think the Europeans are trying to say with this display of NATO strength?
I think the direct message is that, look, we're going to take advantage of the fact that a member of NATO, an allied European partner, has sovereign control over this very strategic base point in the Arctic, and the Arctic is becoming increasingly important in geopolitical strategy. They're saying, you know, we are going to support our Danish NATO member partner state in making sure that we keep this viable from a security standpoint, and nobody, they'll say the Russians or the Chinese, but nobody comes in here and tries to kick us off the top of the rock on this. Quietly, I'm hearing that this is a show of unification with the Danes and the Danish military and the Danish central government. They're basically coming together saying, look, either we are going to have a collective unified voice as Europe to offset Donald Trump and his bully rhetoric, or we're going to have to defend it ourselves. Look, the fact that Macron, Merz, And even Keir Starmer is saying, look, we're going to increase our presence in Greenland, sends a message to Washington saying, look, you can bully one of us, you can't bully all of us, and it's not going to be good for either of us.
Well, you mentioned Russia and China a few times there. Trump saying that control of Greenland is absolutely necessary to counter Russia and China. Do you think there's a way that the European NATO allies, by putting these extra troops there, are saying, look, we've got this. We can do this together. We don't need you to take control over the island. We're all in this together when it comes to Russia and China.
That's a very good point. And also we have to be realistic here is, you know, Donald Trump is trying to play catch up. He sees all of the activity. You know, the Russians have an incredible military and strategic presence north of the Arctic Circle. I mean, they have entire cities and bases that give them a strategic advantage over some of these future shipping lanes, over these future points of commerce in the area. Even the Chinese have established a maritime presence in the Arctic that kind of leaves us kind of scratching our head going, well, we missed the boat on that one, no pun intended. And then the other aspect here is, you know, our Scandinavian partners have an advantage, and Donald Trump is going, wait. Everybody else has got a huge presence there. I should have a bigger presence in Europe. I should have the biggest presence in NATO and the biggest presence in the Western Hemisphere in the Arctic, not the Canadians, not our Scandinavian partners. So he's making the point that says, or he's trying to make maneuvers to say that I am playing with the big dogs too. Now, whether that will stand, I don't think it'll play well with either our NATO partners. And quite frankly, I think everybody in the global community is kind of looking at this and shrugging their head and going, this makes no sense. And it takes away from our credibility as a trusted partner.
But a working group has been agreed between the United States and Denmark, which sounds like something from a business away day, really, rather than diplomatic relations. But do you think this is going to be good for easing tensions and for being able to realistically reach some kind of compromise?
It's a Band-Aid. Honestly, Mark, look, there's no question here. The question of Danish sovereignty over Greenland is not in question. It has been there for decades, almost, you know, as long as anybody can remember. It has been under the sovereign control, and it has been recognized and even appreciated by previous U.S. administrations. I think this working group is going to be basically a kabuki dance, per se, of diplomacy. The bottom line here is Prime Minister Frederiksen is going to stand firm, saying, look, you are not going to question our sovereignty. If we question your sovereignty, you'd be losing your mind. And quite frankly, Prime Minister Frederiksen has a point there. I think what this will do is this is just going to continue to push the inevitable, is that Denmark is going to maintain a sovereign control of the autonomous region of Greenland. We will come to an agreement to allow expanded commercial and strategic access to parts of Greenland that we normally may not have. And I think it will eventually settle down. But again, as we've seen with the rest of Trump's foreign policy in this past year of his new term, anything is in play. I've given up trying to handicap this race because you can't. You just toss a coin in the air and say, where does it land? The foreign policy, could it land anywhere?
Yes, unpredictable indeed. It's worth mentioning the people of Greenland and their opinion as well. The latest poll in Greenland, 85% do not want to be taken over by America, and many of them want to be independent from Denmark as well. It's worth mentioning. Justin Thomas Russell, thank you very much for joining us from Florida, and wish you the best. Thank you very much. Now, from the frozen expanses of Greenland, we turn to the skies over Europe. And of course, Ukraine, or a different form of warfare, is rewriting the rules. Drones, algorithms, and emergency diplomatic meetings are redefining the balance of power, raising questions about whether institutions like the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe can still influence outcomes, or if European countries are moving towards capability-driven alliances outside of NATO. Now, according to government UK news outlet, Russia's recent strikes, including missiles near NATO borders, signal a dangerous escalation. They say by targeting power grids during a freezing winter, Moscow is weaponizing the cold against civilians. These barbaric, in their words, attacks aim to terrorize Ukraine and threaten global security. Politically, the Kremlin uses fake narratives to block peace initiatives, while Ukraine and its partner seek a just settlement. Russia's ongoing aggression proves it remains the main obstacle to ending this war, the article says. The UK stands firm. Putin cannot break Ukraine's resilience or deter international support. For lasting peace to happen, Moscow must stop the violence and engage in real negotiations. That's from the article from Government UK. Meanwhile, the Moscow Times has reported that President Putin is signaling a reset, offering to restore ties with Europe. He demands respect for Russia's security interests to end the current diplomatic freeze. This move marks a potential shift after years of deep tension. European capitals are divided, while France and Italy suggest opening dialogue. Brussels remains cautious. There is growing fear that Europe will be sidelined as Washington and Moscow dominate upcoming peace negotiations. For global observers, this is a strategic race. Europe is now fighting for a seat at the table to protect its interests in a changing world. Now, in response to escalating Russia-Ukraine war, Europe is confronting the dual challenges of drone warfare and institutional inertia. Emergency Organization for Security and Cooperation meetings in Europe, in Vienna, seek to coordinate collective action. But meanwhile, nations like Sweden and France are building ad hoc alliances to counter unmanned threats. Joining us to analyse whether Europe is reshaping the balance of power or merely engaging in diplomatic posturing is Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much indeed, Ginger, for being here with us. So these meetings then, how effective are they going to be, these OSCE meetings? Is that what is needed to respond to the urgent crises?
Well, first, hello, Mark. Thank you for having me today, and greetings to your viewers. And what these meetings, such as the OSCE meeting, are signifying is that Europe is becoming more desperate. And in fact, the OSCE meeting held on January 15th, did indicate that Europe says they are ready to enforce a ceasefire, to monitor a ceasefire, and to surveil the territory as soon as one is agreed to. And in a sense, this is whistling past the graveyard. It has become apparent that Europe does not have the military might or the stockpile of weapons to continue the war in Ukraine without American support. And at the same time, Europe is unwilling to grant any concessions or even to engage in diplomatic conversations with Europe. This has been their strategy since the beginning of the war. And in fact, Putin's offer to create a working group and directly engage with the Europeans is a sign that Putin is also growing weary of European and Ukrainian intransigence. Putin has long accepted that this conflict will be settled on the battlefield. However, as we see with Sweden, Spain, and other European countries engaging with companies such as Indra, such as Edge, which specialize in modern warfare, radar technology, unmanned systems, drone capabilities. It appears that Europe is trying to expand their arsenal beyond conventional weapons. And we do know that the European countries have given the majority of their conventional weapons to Ukraine during the course of this war, which is now in its fourth year. So it appears that the European nations know that Donald Trump is not going to be riding to the rescue in Ukraine. Indeed, Donald Trump is overextended. We are becoming bogged down in Venezuela at the same time that Trump is trying to take Greenland from Denmark. We even see NATO countries stating that they will defend Greenland if America moves in to take Greenland. So there are many rapidly moving developments, and the situation is changing rapidly. We see that NATO countries are prepared to confront Trump over Greenland at the same time that NATO countries want America to commit to a long-term security architecture and NATO Article 5 type security guarantees to Ukraine. We know that Trump wants to extricate from Ukraine, does not want to give these security guarantees. So we are now seeing this push by the European countries to expand their capabilities, once again, with drone warfare, unmanned systems, electronic systems, surveillance, while Donald Trump is extricating from the Ukraine war and trying to pivot to our own hemisphere, Venezuela, Greenland. So things are going to get very interesting over the next few weeks. However, none of Europe's meetings, summits, photo ops, and working groups are really going to change the course of the battle.
Yeah, so like from Trump's perspective, he doesn't really have a lot of time or really value these kind of forums like the OSCE, does he? And he's been saying, he's been saying that the thing that's stopping them from getting a deal on Ukraine and Russia is actually Zelensky himself. Is Trump just tiring of all this?
Yes. Well, we do know that Trump likes to take strong initial action, create a very bold statement, have a lot of publicity, photo ops, and then President Trump loses interest and he wants to move on to the next item on his agenda. And indeed, because he does not have a clear strategy, specific steps towards a pathway to peace, Trump appears to just be winging it as he goes along. And yes, Mark, you are correct. Trump tends to dismiss working groups. He tends to dismiss alliances. He has placed America on a pathway of unilateral action. Might makes right. And as President Trump's cabinet has said, dismissing international law in favor of America's military power, and once again, might makes right. So all of these working groups, they are much like the negotiations that America had been having with Europe and Zelensky, where Europe, America, Zelensky are meeting. We are having summits, photo opportunities, lots of publicity. And yet, in the end, we are negotiating with ourselves, leaving Russia out of the loop, and nothing is accomplished. There is no forward progress because the other major negotiating partner, Russia, is not at the table. So these working groups are doomed to have very little effect, and Trump is going to do what he wants to do, regardless of what Europe does, regardless of what NATO wants Trump or America to do.
Yeah, You mentioned might makes right there. I think this was said by, Stephen Miller on television during the week. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff for President Trump. This new way of looking at things that, strength, it used to be peace through strength, and now it's just might makes right. This is very difficult for America's European allies to get into their body politic, isn't it?
Yes, and this might makes right is it is not a strategy that is actually helping America. It is not helping our foreign policy. It is creating more problems for America as we create chaos on the world stage. Donald Trump thinks that one of his greatest strengths is his unpredictability. No one knows what he's going to do. However, in these rapidly changing times, unpredictability in a world leader is dangerous because other countries act on this. For example, we know that Trump makes bold, provocative statements and does not realize that other countries act on those statements, and then Trump is boxed in. And this is what we see happening in Ukraine. Trump is boxed in. He has fewer options because of his bellicose statements. And indeed, as you mentioned, Trump has said on several occasions that he believes Zelensky is the biggest obstacle to peace. However, in truth, neither Putin nor Zelensky are budging an inch. And as time goes on, their positions are further apart than when this war started. So what we are seeing is Trump is not bringing the sides closer together. And also, in addition to the unpredictability, Trump does not appear to realize that we are not an honest broker. America is supplying weapons and support to Ukraine, which makes us very biased and makes us unable to honestly negotiate a workable agreement between Russia and Ukraine, because we have a vested interest in continuing weapon sales, and there is also pressure from Europe, and importantly, pressure from the military-industrial complex within the United States. So this might makes right is disrupting world affairs. And indeed, with respect to Steve Miller, he also said this with respect to the ICE and immigration officers on the streets of America. He told them the same thing with respect to our own protesters. Mike makes right. Go after the protesters. We see this as having a devastating effect on the streets of America, and on the international stage, Might Makes Right is also having a devastating effect on global security and global peace prospects.
Yeah, and you mentioned this drones and drone warfare just a moment ago. And do you think there's a significance in Europe's trilateral drone alliance and how this is starting to reshape traditional defense cooperation?
Yes, the war in Ukraine has completely changed military analysts' view of modern battle. And indeed, our military analysts are worried about our battleships, our aircraft carrier strike groups, because in light of Russia's innovations, in light of the Oreshnik hypersonic missile, the Kinzhal, especially in light of their Poseidon submarine missile technology, American large battleships are sitting ducks out on the water. And indeed, this may be why Trump has been reluctant to move our battleships off the coast of Venezuela towards the Mediterranean Sea in light of increasing volatility with Iran. If our battleships are in the Mediterranean Sea, they are targets for Iranian missiles. So military warfare is changing rapidly. Drone warfare, unmanned systems, surveillance, satellite reconnaissance, electronic systems. These are all the face of modern warfare. They are less expensive than conventional weapons. They are more flexible. They are adaptable to changing battlefield conditions. And indeed, with ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance.
Okay,
Modern battle has changed.
Thank you so much for your insights as always, Ginger Chapman, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for being on the program. Always appreciated. Now, tonight we've navigated a world at a crossroads. From Arctic sovereignty disputes to Europe's battle against a weaponized winter, the global order is indeed shifting. As power centers redefine diplomacy and defense, the quest for a stable future continues. Thanks for watching tonight's episode of In Focus, and stay tuned for more here on Q News.